Welcome back, boxing fans. Imagine being such a hateful motherfucker that the only thing that you ever spew is fucking racial diatribes. Literally, I just shit on Dante the other day by going in on Virgil Ortiz because his next fight's not going to be against Murtazaliev, right? Ironically, though, he did not have anything to say about Fundura, who just came back and fought Booker, as opposed to unifying with Bud Crawford or unifying with Murtazaliev, right? He didn't have anything to say about him because this dude is a fucking liar who's full of shit, who from the inception of his channel always pushed these racial narratives. So literally, he makes a video today fanboying Keyshawn Davis, as you should. Keyshawn Davis is one of the brightest up-and-coming fighters in boxing today. I've been saying this shit for a long time, and people have been shitting on Keyshawn like crazy. Even today on my live, fucking the usual suspects came in and said, how come Keyshawn's ducking Andy Cruz? Right? People are such mental cases. They can't just understand the sport of boxing. It always has to be attached to some fucking narrative. But that's Dante, right? That's what this guy's whole channel is about. So you make a video praising Keyshawn, but then somehow you need to turn it into an anti-Virgil Ortiz fucking video. Because everything needs to be a racial thing. Everything has to have a racial component. You can't just praise a good, upcoming Black American fighter for doing great things in the sport of boxing. You gotta somehow make it a comparison between him and someone else. As if yesterday's video wasn't bad enough when he had to compare Virgil Ortiz to Bud Crawford, a 37-year-old Bud Crawford who's getting near the end of his career, as opposed to a Virgil Ortiz who's just winding in to really the prime of his career, right? and now, of course, he talked about how Keyshawn Davis in his 13th fight, Virgil Ortiz in his 13th fight wasn't fighting this level of competition. Yeah, dumbass, because Virgil Ortiz became a pro real early in his career. By the time he fought his 13th fight, he was like 21 years of age. Keyshawn is a high-level amateur who didn't come into the pros until later on in his career, after being an amateur fighter. So, of course, he's been fast-tracked, just like most elite Olympic fighters do get fast-tracked. So there's no shock or surprise there. And even in doing that, ironically enough, still the usual suspects have shit all over Keyshawn, hated on him because, of course, his affiliation with Top Rank, Bud Crawford, and Shakur Stevenson. He's on the wrong side of the street, so he's got to be hated on, even though he looks like them. He's still got to be hated, right? But nonetheless, people will use him to try to push these racial fucking narratives. Why not just praise Keyshawn for doing what he's doing? You don't need to hate on everybody else in the process. That is some petty ass bullshit. But that's what we get in this YouTube boxing community. I mean, ironically enough, when Keyshawn was fighting, the Argentinian fighter who came down in weight, people literally criticized him for dragging the guy down in weight, even though the guy ended up not making weight, and so it was irrelevant anyway. And this is the same guy that some people feel beat Richardson Hitchens, but yet people shit on Keyshawn for fighting him as if somehow he wasn't a top-level opponent, which he was. Then he came out and he had a world title fight against Lomachenko's Olympic teammate, right? And this guy was just coming off of a career-best victory beating Navarrete. But still, they couldn't even give Keyshawn Davis praise then, right? They still have to criticize him because, well, he wasn't fighting Shakur Stevenson, right? That's the fight boxing fans want. They want him to fight Shakur Stevenson. No. Boxing fans don't want that fight. Hating motherfuckers want that fight because what they want to do is shit on both of those fighters to protect Tank Davis, right? That's what that's about. You just can't make sense of these kind of people and the hateful shit they push daily on their channels. Virgil Ortiz is a guy who came off of some serious health issues, bounced back, had a iffy fight against Bohojchuk, in his first fight really at the weight against a top level fighter. Ended up facing a fighter who gave Bud Crawford a real tough matchup in Madrimov. People praised him for jumping into this level of competition right after a very tough fight against Bohulchuk, where he got dropped 2 times. Ironically enough, he had also stepped in to face Tim Tszyu on the Bud Crawford undercard. The reason that fight didn't happen is because Tim Tszyu pulled out of that fight because his cut hadn't healed completely, right? And then, of course, after this Madrimov fight, literally Ortiz was negotiating to get a fight with Boots Ennis. Yes, the same Boots Ennis that apparently Virgil Ortiz has been ducking for years. Yet the guy that walked away from that fight was Boots Ennis, not Virgil Ortiz. So now the fact that he's not going to fight Bakram Murtazaliev next, he's coming under scrutiny. Yet this fighter is doing more than majority of fighters out there. You look at all these dudes fighting once a year. You think about Charlo, when Charlo was a champion at 154 pounds. He literally ducked Murtazaliev for fucking years. The guy was his mandatory for an extended period of time. They gave that guy payouts so that he wouldn't get in the way of Charlo trying to become undisputed. Because Charlo was trying to be undisputed, people kind of looked past it. But at the same time, he needed several of those exemptions because obviously he lost once to Tony Harrison, had to come back and rematch him, then had a draw with Castano, had to come back and rematch him, right? So, if you want to talk about somebody who blatantly ducked Murtazaliev, maybe you should talk about Charlo, right? He's the guy that ducked him, not Ortiz. Ortiz is obviously currently an interim world champion for the WBC. And being an interim champion, he's got a potential fight with Funduro. Everybody knows the bigger money fight between Murtazaliev and Funduro is easily Funduro, right? That fight's just going to be a far more successful fight, whether it's on pay-per-view or however they end up generating it. Murtazaliev, coming off of back-to-back Eastern Europeans, neither of whom have big fan bases in America, you're not really building your name up huge to become a star in the division. Fighting a third Eastern European back-to-back probably wouldn't have been the smartest or wisest direction for Virgil Ortiz to go anyway. But of course, Dante knows this, but he just refuses to acknowledge it because it goes against the racial narrative he's trying to push in his video. But let me know what you think. Do you think Ortiz is ducking Bakram Murtazaliev? Does he need to fight him? A guy that probably should chase after Bakram Murtazaliev would be Charles Conwell, a guy who unfortunately hasn't really gotten the opportunities a lot of these other fighters have gotten. So when you have a champion that's not a big name, obviously can't generate big money, but you're a dangerous fighter who also doesn't have a big name and also can't generate big money, this is the perfect potential opponent for you. You could make that fight. It won't cost the promoters exorbitant amounts of money to make. It's a great style matchup. And if you beat Murtazaliev, being an American, you became way more marketable than Murtazaliev in the U.S. market. So now Conwell becomes a real potential opponent for guys like, obviously, the Puerto Rican kid who's trying to get the WBO title, Funduro, and obviously Virgil Ortiz, right? You put yourself right in the mix and make that whole division about America. See, this is the way real boxing fans look at stuff. They look at viable fights, they look at why fights don't happen, and they understand the reasoning behind it, right? It's not all about pushing a racial narrative and making something about hate. But let me know what you would like to see happen at the 154-pound division. Because ironically enough, as I stated in many videos, the division is banging. It's got a ton of really good opponents. So it would be fun to see any of these guys match up. It don't really matter, particularly, which of these guys are matching up. Now that Bud Crawford is leaving the division is lacking a superstar, but it's still full of quality fighters. right? So let's get these guys fighting each other. Virgil already showed you that he's more than willing to fight any tough fighter, even if it's not specifically a big name fighter with a big fan base that guarantees to generate big money. He's done it 2 times in a row.